A man in his underwear walks through the forest, feeling confused and lost, while behind the scenes there are numerous calls from citizens of the country to the emergency services. They all feel that something incomprehensible is happening, but no one knows what exactly. Meanwhile, the man enters some kind of black substance and disappears into it. Day 1. Closure. During a lockdown, a test is being held at one of the schools for 4 lagging students. The teacher drives the teenager into the classroom, takes away phones, and hands out an assignment. Jake can't get started and tries to ask to go to the toilet, but the teacher knows all his tricks and doesn't fall for it. Then the guy writes a note and asks Ash, who is sitting in front of him, to give it to Lisa. But the teacher spots it and demands that he read the letter out loud. However, it turns out to be not quite decent, but the teacher immediately figures out who the author of the note is, and Jake gets into trouble again. Suddenly, all the phones in the locked closet start ringing. A siren sounds outside. Shadows from flying planes flash by, and it becomes clear that something extraordinary is happening. The teacher's phone rings immediately, and he apologizes and leaves the classroom, leaving Roy in charge. The girl tries to maintain order, but the phones in the nightstand keep ringing. Then Jake tries to break down the doors, but then a warning comes over the intercom asking everyone to stay in their classrooms and wait for further instructions. Turning on the radio, the students hear alarming news that the Earth has been attacked. Unknown objects have appeared all over the planet, not letting people near them. The teenagers break into the nightstand and disassemble their gadgets. Roy suggests that a shooter has entered the school and is trying to hide, but the others laugh at her. Ash suddenly begins to hallucinate, but Lizzie brings her out of this state, and then birds begin to crash against the school windows, and then the lights go out. Jake suggests leaving, and then something big and heavy flies by from above. Walls are drawn from something, and ceiling tiles crumble. They go out into the corridor. Things are scattered everywhere. The light is flickering, and they have to light the way with flashlights. Ash continues to hallucinate, and in her visions, she understands that there is something ahead. The teenagers approach a black substance that has blocked the entire passage. Ash looks at the seemingly living material and hears words in her head calling her to go behind this curtain. She sees Jake kicking a ball there, and it disappears, as if it was transported somewhere. But no one wants to check where it was transported. Lizzie wants to find another way out, but Ash suggests entering the substance, because this is an opportunity to see something unknown. She approaches the wall and reaches out her hand to it, but Lizzie pushes her away and scolds her for stupidity. And Jake even rushes into a fight, because he was afraid for Lizzie, who could go after Ash. Rory separates them, and the guy apologizes for hitting the girl, but Ash suddenly hears an order to push and follows it, and then Jake disappears behind a black curtain, taking Rory with him. Lizzie and Ash stand dumbfounded in front of the wall, not understanding what to do next. Ash hears words in her head that Lizzie does not like her, goes to the wall and disappears behind it. The sound of a siren is heard from the street, and the girl looking back takes a step after her classmate. In the empty corridor, the lights also flicker, and the sounds of an attack are heard. Time passes, the cities become empty, because people disappear to who knows where. Scientists called this effect doors or portals, where millions of Earthlings went. True, some returned, unable to explain what happened to them there. And soon volunteers appeared who agreed to enter these doors. They were given the nickname Snitches. One day the snitch Becky finds herself on the seashore and, looking at the rocks, suddenly thinks about their fate. They have been standing motionless for centuries, forever waiting for the wave that flows, rages, and simply exists. And the rock will forever remain a prisoner of the ocean. Her friend Vince, having listened to the girl, admires how beautifully she conveyed the essence of the wave of rocks, and does not understand why she spares the stones, because this is their purpose. Then birds fly up over the nearby forest, reminding the couple that it is time to go. 15 days have passed since the first portals appeared on Earth, causing a worldwide race to study them. Becky and Vince are members of the Snitch Squad, and right now they are preparing to enter one of the portals. Soon they are met by the military, who ensure the safety of the people, and everyone goes to the house, which has become a portal. In addition, Vince enters the group. The group is given 12 minutes to examine the portal, since if you stay there longer, people start to go psychotic. People enter inside and immediately notice the strange arrangement of objects, as if the portal was pulling them towards itself. Becky hears an invitation to enter in her head and takes a step. People seem to find themselves in another part of the house, from where 3 different corridors lead. The girl suggests splitting up because this way they can examine a much larger area. The lieutenant goes into an asymmetrical corridor and suddenly hears crying. He reaches a room in which he sees a large bed and a woman sitting on it. He habitually describes what he sees when the girl raises her head and expresses dissatisfaction with his intent gaze. The man tries to convince himself that all this is an obsession, although it seems very real. He is surprised by the number of flowers decorating the room, and the girl is indignant that he does not remember her name Rose. But the lieutenant does not agree. She does not look like his Rose at all. There are 9 minutes left before the exit from the portal when Becky reaches a white kitchen where different dishes are in a strange order and bottles are upside down. In the middle is a cradle, and a voice in her head commands Becky to look into it. The girl notes that the cradle is rocking by itself and there is no one inside. Meanwhile, Vince finds a room in the style of the 80s. There are cups for participation in competitions, and the clock on the wall is frozen at the number 3. The guy notes a marble bust and a deep pantry, but when he closes the door, he suddenly hears advice in his head to go there. It turns out that the witch's room is the door to the next room. It is a little smaller, and the bust here is different, and the clock is on 6. He goes to the next witch's room and finds himself in the 3rd room. Bust is completely strange here. His mouth is crooked, and the clock shows 9. Having passed into the next witchcraft, the guy finds himself in the 4th room, where Bust has cubes instead of eyes. At this time, the lieutenant sees how Rose begins to shake. He helps her come to her senses, but the voice in her head advises him to love her. The man steps away and sees a bottle of pills in the hands of the beauty. Meanwhile, Becky sees how a man in a cape enters the kitchen, who has a black substance splashing instead of a face. He calls her darling, which the girl does not like at all. Suddenly, her stomach begins to hurt, and the voice in her head congratulates her on her pregnancy. Becky grabs a phaser and aims at the black face, and suddenly she finds herself in a lived-in kitchen, and Vince is standing in front of her, at whom she aims from a rattle. There are 5 minutes left before the exit. Vince runs back through all the rooms, and the lieutenant snatches the bottle from Rose because she promised not to take them. And then the inside of his spacesuit helmet starts filling with flower petals until the man suffocates. Meanwhile, Becky feels her belly growing, and something in her head tells her it's a girl, and Vince insists that they stay here forever. She screams and picks up the rattle and shoots. Meanwhile, the man suddenly finds himself in his apartment and sees himself at the table. Vince number 2 is asking questions when another man runs into the room. Vince alone records a message that he sees 2 copies of himself, but the guys suddenly start arguing with him, insisting that they are the real thing and that the copy is him. The 3 Vinces argue, and the one in the suit calls Becky. He assures her that he is the real thing, because he is the only one of them wearing a protective suit, but suddenly it disappears, and he turns out to be dressed in regular clothes. There are 3 minutes left before the exit when Becky enters the apartment with an armed man. The voice in her head offers to recognize Vince. The girl's suit also disappears, and she tries to understand what is happening. Vince number 1 tries to explain that they are psychotic, and the other 2 are copies. Each starts to prove their case, but Becky chooses and shoots Vince number 2. 2 are left, and suddenly the 3rd one remembers what she said on the beach about the rocks and the waves, and the 2nd one talks about the time he got a nosebleed. And suddenly the 3rd one admits that he is a fake. But Becky shoots the 1st one because she wants to be a wave. A few weeks passed after the first snitches appeared. Half the world's population has disappeared, and although this is probably good for nature, the remaining people are scared. They want answers. On the 101st day of the portal's appearing, a lone forest survivor named Jamal listens to advice on how to deal with portals on the radio, asking people not to approach them and not to give them names. The man goes into the forest where he recently found a portal and starts a conversation with his equipment. The portal does not respond until Jamal increases the frequencies, and suddenly he sees the surface of the portal twitch and immediately responds to him, agreeing to talk. The alien calls himself a friend who arrived on the planet where he saw living beings. Their goal is to archive people, which Jamal does not understand. Later, Katie and Leo come to him, to whom he tells about his portal, and then he leads them to it. The couple is impressed by the appearance of the portal, and when it begins to respond, the people are delighted. Katie talks to it, which calls a name unpronounceable to people, but it turns out to be Jamal in reverse. The portal repeats the goal, to archive humanity, and suddenly Katie decides that this will help people get on the map of star civilizations. They can quit teaching and study space. Suddenly the sheriff appears, who, as it turns out, was called by Leo. He, threatening with a gun, orders Jamal to step away from the equipment and begins to call for backup. And suddenly the policeman starts shooting at random, destroying Leo, and then points the gun at Jamal, preparing to destroy him too, but ends up shooting himself. Lamash calls the remaining couple friends, and they look up to see shells flying over the ground. Sometime later, the video blogger is desperately arguing with philosopher Alan Price, who considers the arrival of the Doors a new step for humanity because they changed everything. They are a cosmic creation of the arbiter of existence. Their mind allows them to act in different dimensions. You can even consider them a god. The blogger cannot believe his words, but Price asks people to just wait for them to be updated, after which humanity will shift to another reality. Suddenly, the blogger feels something calling him. Price asks him to accept it and not to be afraid, that his experiences and thoughts will be refreshed. He feels in the doorway what humanity has already forgotten, and here the blogger hides his true feelings, but the process has already begun, and he just needs to accept it. Suddenly, he moves away from the monitor, screams, realizing the changes, and then silently walks to the second floor, undressing on the way, while Price calls for acceptance of his new reality.